Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes. This is a 2014 Ford Fusion Energy plug-in hybrid. That's why there's a plug coming out of the front right there. And this is a Graco Classic Ride 50 child seat. This is our child seat review of all of the Ford Fusion models. So while there are some differences on the inside of the hybrid and the Energy models of the Fusion, they really don't matter when it comes to installing child seats in the back. Before we dive right inside, let's talk about the profile of the Ford Fusion, because I find the Fusion one of the most attractive mid-size sedans available, not just in this mid-size mass market class, but of any price range. I really like the looks. It's an absolutely gorgeous vehicle, front, side, and rear. Part of the reason, of course, is this coupe-like profile, however, in the back. The back of the Fusion slants very aggressively down. It means that there's not as much headroom in the back as you'll find in something that's very upright, like a Honda Accord. It also means that getting in and out of the back is a little bit trickier, and getting child seats in and out of the back is even trickier. You can see I'm 6 feet tall, and this door comes up right around my chest here. So it's not a very high off the ground vehicle. It makes getting child seats in and out of the car a little bit more of a pain in the back, and it means that you may bang your head right here on the ceiling when you're getting a child in and out of the car. Let's look at rearward facing child seats. This child seat is installed in a rearward facing fashion. This front seat's adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. I do like to sit in a fairly upright position. But as you can see, there's a reasonable amount of room between this child seat and that front seat. That's because the Fusion does have a decent amount of rear legroom, even though headroom is a little bit limited. If I move the front seat all the way back in its tracks, you can see there is still a decent amount of room between this rearward-facing child seat and the front seat. This was suitable for a 6'5" driver, but the seat back angle is still the same that I had it in, so it is fairly upright. If you're a taller person and you prefer a more reclined seating position, there may be a little bit of interference between a child seat in this position and the front driver's seat. Again, this is because the Ford Fusion has a reasonable amount of rear seat legroom. For forward-facing child seat installation, the Fusion only has 2 sets of latch anchors, and those are on the outboard seats. So this middle seat doesn't have latch anchors, so you will have to use the lap and shoulder belt to install a child seat. We do still have a top tether anchor for all seats. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that I noticed this top tether anchor is awfully close to the child seat. So depending on exactly how your child seat's top tether buckle is arranged, it may be difficult to actually tighten this top tether anchor because of the short distance between the anchor itself and the child seat. I had difficulties with this Graco Classic Ride. So as you can see, the top is a little bit loose because it's just not possible to get that top tether anchor any tighter in the Fusion. Because the Fusion is a fairly wide vehicle, we can still fold this 60 portion of the 60/40 folding seat flat. Well, we have a child seat on this 40 portion. Because we're in the Ford Fusion Energy, we have this fairly small slot right above the battery pack that allows you to put larger items from the trunk into the passenger area. This would be larger, of course, in the non-plug-in hybrid, and it would be larger still in the regular old Ford Fusion. One thing to keep in mind is that this still has a slot, and that's not something that you'll find in the Honda Accord Hybrid or the Honda Accord plug-in, and the Toyota Camry does not have a plug-in version. It just has a regular old hybrid one, but it has a very small slot that's maybe about this big right there for longer items like skis only. You couldn't fit anything wide. You could still fit a surfboard in the Ford Fusion Energy through that slot and have a child seat on the side, which is very handy. We now have 2 child seats in the Fusion, and things are starting to get a little bit tighter. Again, this middle seat can only use the lap and shoulder belt because there are no dedicated child seat anchors for this middle seat. It's a very important thing to keep in mind if you plan on putting 2 child seats in the car in this configuration, so you can have the occasional passenger on one side or the other, or you're putting 3 across, is that the middle seat cannot share dedicated child seat anchors for the other 2 seats. So if your car only has 2 sets of latch anchors, you'll know by looking in your instruction manual, then this middle seat must use lap and shoulder belt. You should never share latch anchors because they're not designed to withstand the weight of 2 child seats in an accident. In order to use the top tether anchor in this middle seat, you do have to remove the middle headrest. It is fairly easy to do, but it does interfere with that top tether anchor. The outboard seat anchors do not, however, so you still can keep these headrests in place either in a lower or an upper position and have that top tether anchor work. Let's close the door and see how we fit. And the door is closed. There's actually a reasonable amount of room in the Fusion. There's not as much room as there was in the Honda Accord. And if I sit upright, my head is touching the ceiling, and that's just because the sexy side profile of the Ford Fusion cuts down on rear headroom. There is still a decent amount of legroom, however, in the back, so it's long, but it's not terribly tall back here. It is fairly wide, and the seat is reasonably comfortable. I could buckle myself in if I had to. Because this seat is using the seat belt anchors and not latch anchors in the middle, it is a little bit easier to get my seat belt on. It's perfectly comfortable for an hour or 2. We now have the child seat situation that strikes fear in the hearts of mortal men. It's the 3 child seat across the back of a mid-size sedan test, and the Ford Fusion scores fairly well. Things are a little bit tighter back here than they are in the Honda Accord. even though the Fusion and the Honda Accord supposedly have about the same amount of width right back here in the back seat of the car. That's just down to the way they're measured, as well as the shapes that are going on in the car and how child seats interact versus how humans interact, adults interact in the back seat. If you're unsure of how to install a child seat, or you just want a little bit of help, then go ahead and follow that link down there in the description of this video to find a certified child seat installer. It is a very important thing to get right. So if you're unsure of how to do it, or you have a new car and you've never done it before in that car, or you aren't used to carrying kids around in your car, be sure and check with a professional about how to properly install a child seat in a car first. You don't want to get this wrong. A few things to keep in mind is that most modern cars do have side curtain airbags, and those side curtain airbags may have an impact on a child seat like this if you're in an accident. I still have a little bit of room between this child seat and the door, so that is a good thing. You don't want these pressing right up against the door, but that side curtain airbag will come down to right about here or so on a child seat, so that is something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind, as I said, is that the center seat doesn't have latch anchors, so there's those two bottom anchors on the seat. We still have a top tether anchor, but that was a little bit tricky to install. Lastly, the outboard seat's latch anchors are buried deep in the upholstery, so it is a bit more difficult for someone with a larger hand like me to get their hand in there and install or remove those latch anchors. It took a while, but I was able to fit 2 child seats in the back of the Ford Fusion Energy. The Ford Fusion Hybrid, just because of the way the trunk is arranged, isn't that much more accommodating for child seats, but it will offer a bit more storage room for regular items. And the regular Ford Fusion has a decently sized trunk and was able to accommodate 3 child seats. This will just about close. I swear it closed before. There we go. It will just about close with 2 child seats in there, but it is a really tight fit. So I wedged them in there so I could close it. Let's take them out so you can actually see in the trunk now. You can see why things are a little bit tight, and that's because the Ford Fusion Hybrid plug-in battery occupies a decent amount of trunk space. It's behind this barrier right here. It means that you can fit about 2 roller bags right down here in the cargo floor left, and you do have a little bit of storage space right above the battery pack that you can put smaller items like purses or lamp stands or whatever it is that you want to put up there, like I have right there. And you will find the vehicle's 12-volt battery right back here in the trunk as well on the side. Ford opted for regular old rod style hinges like this rather than the hidden hinges on the side, but they do cover them inside the trunk, so it doesn't really impact the cargo area. So if you can fit it in the trunk, you can close it, so you won't have these trunk bars bopping your luggage on the top. One last nice touch is the Fusion does have a trunk handle on the inside of the trunk to make it easier to close that trunk from the inside or from the outside. Again, I'm Alex Steinks, and this has been the 2014 Ford Fusion Energy Child Seat Review. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen. We should have the full review on the Fusion Energy posted up in just a few days. So if that button at the bottom of your screen doesn't work now, just go ahead and check back with us in a few days and it'll be working then. If you have any questions about this vehicle, you can always comment in this comment section down below. You can always email me at alexonautos, find me at facebook.com/alexonautos, and we'll see you next week.